The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Thanks for hanging out. Welcome into Thursday. It's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing okay. Lot to cover as a college basketball star coach off to the NBA.
Maybe.
I think he put it out on Twitter.
Did he?
4 hours ago.
Have I missed something?
It's okay. It's all right. Danny Hurley won't be screaming at Creighton fans. You can confirm or deny unless it's fake Danny Hurley.
I have to tweet real fast.
You're fine.
I'll
you do
look
that.
into this. I was at the gym 4 hours ago. So
see, good on you. I was out back throwing the ball for the German Shepherd.
The problem is his Sports Center's on. It was still just Adrian Wojnarowski reports.
That's because it was Sports Center from this morning, and they're re-airing it, probably.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, Elijah's gonna tweet away. We will get your input, your thoughts. In the StreamYard. Can also dial us up on the Hail Varsity hotline. The toll-free number for you is 800-825-5865 or 489-1240, 489-1240. If you want to get in, can email Chris at hailvarsity.com. Cade Povich, how did it go with Baltimore? We'll let you know what Cade's line was. Plenty of recruiting this weekend and this month. We'll go national with the recruiting scene and what is that Nebraska rep nationally. Greg Smith, national analyst for Rivals. He's going to join us in hour two. Gary Barnett checks in as well in the second hour. And then Danny Burke with BurksBeat.com. Danny will be with us. We'll get his thoughts on some totals and just what he thinks is smart wagering for you if you're into it. For the NBA Finals, Game 1 tonight, Boston set to touch gloves with the Mavericks, so we'll get there. Brandon Vogel checks in as well with Counter Reed, and FPI, good breakdown for him on Nebraska. Some numbers to look at there. So numbers to dial up, numbers to check in on, and let's get our starting five, keeping with that numbers theme. Patrick is in. Patrick got in about 25 minutes ago or so. Patrick, great to have you. KG also checks in with a photo finish. Good to have KG and Patrick. Walter from Philly is in. He's number 3. Matthew checks in at 4 in our starting 5. And Tuck, good to have you back in. Coach Brandon is here. Jeff is in. Jimmy White, good to have you. He's sitting under a shade tree with rum and Coke and a big-ass cigar. Jimmy, I am super excited for you to be doing that. There's no trees this part of Lincoln, and there's no smoking in what was probably a bar room where our station now is. Cliff in from Florida. Cliff, good to have you. Sal is here. Brent, nice to be with you. Thanks for checking in. Black Hills Brennan, Mark, Trevor also checks in. Appreciate you checking us out, Trevor, on the post-work commute. He's celebrating Fridays. Ryan will soon get you to Friday. So that's how things are shaking out for us in the stream.
I've done some research here on Dan Hurley. Not official. Still not official.
What's his Twitter deal then?
He apparently told the team this morning, he confirmed to them that he has been in talks with the Lakers, in negotiations with the Lakers, didn't want to hide the fact that the smoke is real, but the Huskies had a noon practice today, and he told his players it's business as usual for now.
I heard that.
So nothing since then, I believe. Is it a fake Dan Hurley account you got?
Well, the one thing and once you jump on Twitter, of course, it's there for 2 seconds and then
it's gone. Yeah,
it's gone. It says just confirming I'm off to the Lakers. It's been real, UConn, that type of thing. It sounded a little bit not sincere or thank you enough. So I did see the Gino Auriemma interview with Dan Patrick, where Gino was talking with Hurley last night, and you just wonder, because Kentucky came hard after him, and he said no to that, said no to a boatload of money. I just wonder. I mean, the Lakers have been through 7 coaches in 13 years and 1 championship. So it better be the right fit, because Hurley's a guy that runs hot. Hurley's a guy that's opinionated, and the guy runs his program at a level that's intense from a fundamental standpoint. And I think he's a little tough to take, but I don't knock his coaching ability or ability to get those right buttons pushed or get a lot out of his kids. He's been just a phenomenal evaluator of talent and then developer, and he's a hard ass. I respect all of it. I just don't like him jawing at the crowd.
See, I think college basketball is less fun if Dan Hurley were to leave. And my read on it, my read on it is that I don't think Shams would put out the report yesterday that the Lakers are about to hire J.J. Redick unless it was close to being done with Dan Hurley, because if you follow the paper trail, Shams works as a partner with FanDuel, I should say, and FanDuel's got to make their money, so you're going to go change those lines real quick in order to get some money from people thinking, oh, Shams says it's going to be JJ, it's going to be JJ. Let's lock in a bet. First off, that's my first read. Secondly, I don't think either of these two sides let it get out unless it's almost a done deal. Like, I don't think Dan Hurley tells the team this morning unless it's almost a done deal. I don't think somebody in the Lakers front office leaks it to Woj unless there is, in fact, something that is imminent. So my read is by the end of the day, if not by tomorrow, this will probably officially be announced. But it appears, from what I can find on Twitter, nothing official just yet.
We'll see. I would run to the NBA. As big of a leap as that might be for him personality-wise, I would run to the NBA. You're going to be coaching professionals anyway, technically now.
Well, here's the question.
You might as well just go get paid for it and get paid more for it and not put up with the recruiting headache or the portal headache.
Coaching the Lakers especially is, I think, an offer you can't refuse. That is one of the most prominent positions in all of basketball, to be the head coach of the LA Lakers. Something you can't, I think, say no to. But at the same time, do you really think Dan Hurley, your personality is going to jive with LeBron James and Anthony Davis? Those are two guys that have, throughout most of their career, struggled to jive with the coaches that they have been under. I mean, LeBron and Spoelstra did well together.
That's why they have one title in L.A. With them.
Yeah, LeBron and Spoelstra did well together. You could even argue LeBron and Ty Lue didn't do great together, despite the fact that Ty Lue got him a couple titles. Like, there was always some drama going on behind the scenes. Ty
Lue doesn't put up with drama, and that's the Lakers need in a drama-filled town. You need no drama, and Hurley will bring an iron fist and no drama. That's what you're getting. That's what they need.
He's going to be yelling at Jack courtside.
He might scream, and they'll either have to take it or you just move on from LeBron.
They'll go play in New York. He's going to punch Spike Lee at halftime.
He could. There's a line of people, but he could make that happen. So we'll see. And Scott makes a good point. He makes a great point when it comes to that personality. I don't see his style making it 82 games with those egos.
That's my concern as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, you need to be able to fix it because you won one title during the pandemic.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think it is, I don't want to call it reactionary. It is absolutely opposite to what we saw from Darvin Ham all year long, where Darvin Ham standing with his pockets on the sideline as the Lakers are falling apart, and he's not calling timeouts. He's not doing anything. No fire.
It's not his team.
He was just letting LeBron do all the coaching. He's standing out of the huddles. Like, it's a complete opposite to Darvin Ham, and maybe that's what the Lakers need. It's splashy. I do think it's probably better than J.J. Redick. I'm not sure J.J. Redick was ready for the show that is the Lakers to step into that to be his first head coaching role. But we'll see how it goes. If I'm Hurley, I don't think you can say no to the Lakers. But, man, you got a good thing going at UConn. I don't want to say you can kick your feet up because college basketball and college sports in general is not an industry where you can kick your feet up. If you do, you're going to be screwed. But, like, you got a pretty good thing rolling. You have it easier than a lot of head coaches in America with what UConn's got rolling right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
You do. Well, you're working on a three-peat. To college football we go. We'll talk a little more NBA later on in the show. Ryan with a good question here. And Mitch Sherman had a great take on this when it comes to Thomas Fidone. I think he was on this morning with Hurrdat Sports with Damon and Ravi. We love our Tuesday chats with Mitch. And he's asking about Carter Nelson. How do we being Nebraska, utilize our large tight end room? Where does Nelson fit with two plus seasoned guys in that tight end room? Well, I think you're going to see a Nebraska team, and Ryan, good question. I want to hit this because it will be something that Nebraska will need to utilize Fidone, need to utilize Borkature, and need to utilize a guy like Carter Nelson if he's ready to go. And from an athleticism standpoint, we know the guy's a freak. We know from a work ethic standpoint, there's a certain level that Nebraska goes after. All of that being said, it's still an adjustment, right? It's an adjustment for Carter Nelson, and how quickly can he get up to speed? Once that's a comfort thing for him, yeah, you put him in, and you can put him out of the backfield. You can flex him out. You can put him in the slot. You can go 3 tight end like Stanford in Michigan under Harbaugh did with Borkature and with Fidone. And you can just absolutely mismatch the hell out of some opposing defenses. I think that, to answer your question, Ryan, that's how, to me, you utilize 2 of the 3 while you're waiting for the third to get up to speed, unless he just hits the ground running and is incredible out of the gate, which I don't want to put that on him. But if it is the instance or the case, then so be it. You've got 3 fantastic options with the rest of that receiver room, with that running back room you're trying to figure out with an experienced offensive line, all helping out what we think is going to be a young quarterback.
And my question with the tight end room is, I'm with you that getting multiple guys, if you get Fidone and Carter Nelson on the field at the same time, which the question with Carter Nelson is, how does he, we've heard coaches say it before, like freshmen coming and learning the playbook, it's like drinking from a fire hose. Like, how much is Carter Nelson able to ingest and get ready to go by the time the season starts, and how much more can you utilize him as the year goes on? That's the question with him. But like, for a defense, if you're lined up and you have both Thomas Fidone and Carter Nelson out there, more than likely you're going to have a defensive back cover one of those 2 guys, which is a matchup nightmare for a defense. On the flip side of things, I think you have Borkature, who's more of a blocker, a nitty-gritty guy. He's going to do what the team needs him to do. If he gets out there with Fidone, I think I feel good about Fidone's blocking. That creates another matchup issue for the defense, where it's, all right, we're probably going to have to put a bigger linebacker or defensive end onto Borkature, understanding he's likely going to be a guy who's going to be in here blocking. Who do we put on Fidone? Question to me, I think, with the tight ends in terms of what is their usage this year, is can Fidone turn into a guy who's as dangerous as a blocker as he is as a pass catcher? If you can have a guy like that in the tight end room, I mean, that's what made Brock Bauer so dangerous in Georgia. So, yeah, he's a great pass catcher, but he could also stand at the end of the line of scrimmage and absolutely wash a defensive end down the line. Like, that's what made him super dangerous, is you legitimately did not know every single play what his role was going to be. I don't think you have a guy in Carter Nelson or a guy in Borkature that necessarily fits that role. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong there, but like, can Fidone develop, as we talked about yesterday on the show, can he develop into a place where now that he's not rehabbing, trying to get back where he was, now that he's trying to improve and get to a better place, what type of role can he have? And can he have that kind of role that is, the defense has to have the alarm bells going off every single time he's out there, asking themselves, man, do we match up somebody bigger on him because he's going to wash a smaller guy in a blocking scheme, or we have to put that smaller defensive back on him because he's a matchup nightmare for a defensive end or a big linebacker to go out and cover? Like that's the question to me in terms of how
is he going to wear out my linebacker? Is he too big? And is he giving out piggyback rides for the nickel, right? And it could be an instance, too, where the 2 of the 3 guys we've mentioned, their best role may just be that Kelsey role where, they're titled tight end, but they're a big-bodied pass catcher first. That's their strength, and that's what you use. And I think that's where Nebraska will try and hone in with Fidone. I think he's going to have a big year. I think he's going to be that safety net for a young quarterback, and it should be fun to watch. Tody makes a comment in the stream. I think we're going to be good again this year. He's talking Nebraska football. We'll get into your ultimate sports day. Your ultimate day, well, Keanu Reeves talks about it here, We'll talk about it a little bit later on in the show. We'll get Gary Barnett's take on it. But what would your ultimate sports day be? Let's talk about activities. Maybe karate in the garage. Maybe not. But here's Keanu Reeves talking about his ultimate day.
Morning sex, eat a great breakfast, go for a motorcycle ride, come back, swim, have more sex, eat some more, hang out for a little bit, maybe do some reading, go see a movie, have more sex, go to the bar, have a couple of drinks, see some friends, take a motorcycle ride, get home, hang out a little bit, have more sex. That's a pretty good day.
No sports were mentioned, Keanu. Can you have a great day? That sounded like an awesome day as I throw on the old motorcycle helmet. But KG, my ultimate sports day, I play mud wrestling with Cindy Crawford in her prime. Thank you, KG. Real quick, my ultimate sports day, you'd have morning tea time.
Okay.
All right.
Off on the right foot.
Night game.
Okay.
And then it's off to an NFL game Sunday.
That's 2 days.
Yeah, but
2 days.
I know. Okay, you have morning golf, afternoon football, 11 a.m. football, and then you have a night NFL game. Fine.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We welcome in Brandon Vogel. counterread.com in his football office. Vogues, counting down or enjoying the summer or a little of both? How we doing?
I'm doing well. Counting down to football, yes. Kind of excited for NBA Finals to get going. So that'll be nice. Otherwise, trying to enjoy a little bit of summertime activities, I guess I should say.
We'll stay with the basketball just so briefly with the Celtics here. A Boston transplant. You spent part of your time in Beantown, so of course you're a Celtics guy. They're favored to win the series. Should be good. What is your prediction? Boston in ... And also, if you're Hurley, do you jump to Showtime?
Yeah, Boston. I kind of go into this a little bit more nervous than I think I would be based on the season that Boston had. Kind of ran through the postseason, but when they lost, they had these kind of bizarre losses, and we've seen that continue in the playoffs a little bit. Well, I think they're a deserving favorite. I think Dallas poses some trouble, of course. So I'll take the Celtics, but I think it's going to be Celtics in 7. Which is fine for those of us sitting at home. Give us as much NBA Finals basketball, I guess, as we can have from here on out. As for Hurley, it's one of those things that if you're primarily a college basketball fan, and I would consider myself more of a college fan than an NBA fan, it stings a little bit, but you're coming off back-to-back titles, and it's the Lakers. It's kind of tough not to listen, I think, because even if it doesn't work out in the NBA, and we've seen that happen with plenty of coaches, you can still go back to the college game in a couple of years and probably be one of the hottest names available. So it's a little bit of a free roll, a little bit of still a tough decision to make, but I get why the talks are happening.
It's Brandon Vogel with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Brandon, I will say, considering J.J. Redick's name was floating around there yesterday, I think Bobby Hurley would be a better hire than that. You can thank Shams for that one. Maybe he's just trying to influence the betting lines. Who knows? I know he's a FanDuel partner. But back to the Celtics here really fast, because that is big news today. The NBA Finals are starting. Schmidt's actually paying attention for the first time in what seems like years. And I want to get your thoughts. We talked yesterday with Dr. Brandon Seifert on our Jock Dog segment about Kristaps Porzingis and his health as he enters the finals. Sounds like he's going to give it a go. How important do you think he is going to be? Because you look elsewhere among the Celtics front line. I know they have Al Horford, but they seem a little bit thin in that spot, and that's not where Dallas necessarily wants to beat you, but it seems like that would be big from my outside perspective looking in. What's your take on the importance of Porzingis for the Celtics here in this series?
I think it's pretty big. I mean, we've seen the Celtics get to this point, which, they were the 1 seed. They were expected to get to this point without Porzingis for most of that time. But it's required a lot of Horford particularly. And, the old man, I say affectionately, has come up big. I mean, not just this year, but in years past too. But you have to wonder, like, how much can you realistically ask of him to just continue to have these games where he carries the Celtics for a bit, for all the talent they have on the perimeter. And I mean, I know Horford isn't, down there as kind of a traditional low post player at this point. But he's one of their bigs, and asking that much of him, Porzingis would allow them to at least share the load a little bit. And if you could tell me he's a full go for the entire finals and he's close to 100%, that would probably change my outlook on the series as a whole.
Brendan Vogel with us here. There's our NBA Elijah. And we'll move to some college football now. And in Counter Read, Vogues, you and Aaron Sorensen do a great job of putting out weekly articles. CounterRead.com is where you can subscribe. But some reaction to you with the FPI numbers, and I know you love to dig into those with Nebraska. Pretty healthy simulation number. That's 20,000 simulations, and just shy of 5% did it yield Nebraska into the playoff realm, which is pretty impressive. They come in at number 41 with the initial rankings. And, where is the hype meter for you right now as we talk in early June with Nebraska? Are you veering towards some of those national pundits? Are you a little more reserved? I mean, what's the momentum like in your football office?
Yeah, I would say my personal meter veers more towards the optimistic side than the pessimistic side. Certainly, that said, FPI, compared to some of the other power rankings that are out there, was a little bit lower, I thought. Well, not necessarily lower on the Huskers, but it's about how the whole puzzle fits together. So FPI put Nebraska at 6.5 wins. In the sports books, like their over-under on wins is still hanging at 7.5. And I'll probably always lean towards that as our most objective data, because not only do they have, sophisticated algorithms like SP Plus or FPI are running, but they also have public information, like literally people betting into it that influences where those numbers go. So FPI is about a game short of that, but Nebraska's ranking 41st is about where it was at in SP Plus. The big difference was, and I kind of wrote about this trying to look at the big picture approach when you talk about a win total, like FPI is way higher in Colorado than any other place that I've seen. It's higher on UTEP. Now, you might say, well, what's the difference if UTEP's 111th and 125th? Well, when you're trying to calculate win totals, Nebraska being a 28-point favorite in that game, which it is right now, versus a less than 20-point favorite, that makes a difference in kind of this number soup that we get to talk about in the off season. So overall, it was kind of I think consensus view on Nebraska. They were, I believe, the 9th best team in the Big Ten by FPI, which is about where their odds fall, give or take a spot. It's about where they're falling in most of the other power ratings at this point. And I think the important thing to remember here is, like, that's still good. Like, that's still a step up from where they would have been a year ago.
Brent, I know we've talked about this maybe once before in the past. I want to reset it here. Also fair to say, though, that with these metrics, with these computers, they can't truly account for the impact of a freshman quarterback. They can try, but it's almost impossible in that sense, meaning Dylan Raiola is kind of the wild card in terms of where Nebraska's floor actually sits.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. And I mean, in some cases, like if they'd brought in, say, your average transfer, whoever that may be, like Kyle McCord, I think, when we were thinking that looked like a possibility, would have been above average transfer, even though he had 1 year as a starter at Ohio State. But say you bring in a 3-year guy from a G5 conference or maybe even FTS, like, yeah, you can try and plug those numbers in. And it would get you closer to, I think, a point where you're saying, okay, well, Nebraska has a better chance to have just at least average quarterback play, which it didn't have a year ago. You don't have any of those numbers for a freshman. They're kind of just a blank slate. In fact, when you talk about it from a kind of formula or algorithm sense, like the only thing that's getting counted for Dylan Raiola right now is, or even Kalen, is their star rating, which, you know, can be a benefit too to Nebraska. So I think when you think about Nebraska going into 2024, it's really like, can they get better quarterback play than they had a year ago? I think that's the way that I choose to look at it. And knowing at least a little bit about how some of these power ratings work, I think that's pretty close to how they view it from a numbers perspective.
Some FBI thoughts from Brandon Vogel, counterread.com.
FPI?
I said FBI.
I think it said FBI.
I stumbled.
That'd be a different tenor of interview, I tell you what.
All documents have been destroyed. We're good.
If you're talking FBI, CIA, we might have a target on our back.
FPI, much like the Boulder Peace Treaty. Okay, what's your take on Nebraska's schedule? The narrative is it's more manageable than past schedules. No Penn State, no Michigan, totally get it. On the other hand, it's still ranked the 32nd toughest in the country and 12 out of 18 in the Big Ten, so it leans a little bit more manageable. Is there a sneaky uh-oh game on Nebraska's schedule at first glance for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the schedule sets up pretty well still. And like, you know, they got the 32nd toughest schedule in the country, but you mentioned where it ranks in the Big Ten. Like, you play a 9-game schedule against one of the 2 best conferences in the country. Like, it's just going to be hard for your schedule to rank that low nationally in a system like this. I think the thing that stands out to me about Nebraska's schedule, the longer I've looked at it, is the toughest Big Ten opponents they play, at least the 3 toughest Big Ten opponents they play by FPI, are all on the road. And if you're Ohio State, if you're a Penn State, if you're a team that's, you know, in the top 4 or 5 in the conference and expected to potentially play for a conference title, that's tough. If you're Nebraska, a team that's trying to get back to bowl eligibility for the first time since 2016, I think that's good. Like, if you're going to have those games where you're not a favorite or you're not even a slight underdog, you know, those games that are outside, say, -4, +4, you know, toss-up territory, essentially, like, let those games be on the road at this point. Like, you can worry about that a couple of seasons down the road when, you know, hopefully Husker fans will be able to pencil Nebraska in for 9 wins and be like, you know, this is a year where you get Ohio State at home, so maybe it's 10 or 11 wins. So I think that's the thing that jumps out. In terms of tricky games, FPI was pretty high on Rutgers, which I looked at as a game that, you know, could go kind of either way for Nebraska. Colorado is another one. They're a team that's it's tough for me to get a read on them. And it's tough for me to get a read on Indiana. That's one I'm really, really watching. Like, I really like the coaching staff that they brought in. They brought in a slew of guys from James Madison as transfers that basically came with that coaching staff. Like, I think they're going to be better in a hurry. They're showing up last in most of these Big Ten power ratings. I'll be surprised if they finish there. I think Indiana could be a bowl team for sure. And, you know, going to Bloomington is a little outside the norm for Nebraska. They've only been there once since being in the Big Ten, and that game's in October. Whatever Nebraska is at that point, Indiana is at that point. They'll have a better sense of it. So that's one that, as we go further into the summer, kind of jumps out more and more to me as, hey, that could be a tricky one.
Brandon Vogel with us here from Counter Read, Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Cornhead Lager. A couple minutes overtime here for Vogues as we're talking FPI and some of the numbers with Nebraska. -9 per FPI, -20, -4. You mentioned the road venues, Brandon, for Nebraska, at SC, at Ohio State, at Iowa. You know, of those three, I mean, Ohio State's the Everest to climb in the conference, along with, it feels like, Oregon. Are you sold that SC is going to be better? We know the talent level's high. They just are making a transition, and they've lost a lot. Iowa, I think they have long memory of 2 years ago. But under the lights, I mean, that'll be a sweet environment. 8 games, though, Nebraska's favored. Could Nebraska steal two of those 3 road games we're talking about?
I think so. I think Ohio State's the only one you kind of put like off to the side of, you know, it's Ohio State. FPI had Oregon ahead of the Buckeyes, which is a little bit unique. I mean, we're only talking like a couple of points here. It's the number 2 team in the country versus the number 4. But still, you see Ohio State ranked ahead in most places, and we'll see. Like, the notion of Ohio State not just adding what they did in the transfer portal, but Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator strikes fear in me. And I'm not a coach in the Big Ten. So we'll see how that plays out. But those other 2, Iowa has more than earned the benefit of the doubt from me, and I think pretty much everybody else who watches Big Ten football. Like, yeah, they're just going to be Iowa, and it's going to be tough, particularly at the end of the year. When you're a little bit banged up, and everybody's a little bit banged up. But could Nebraska steal that one? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw a Nebraska team do that 2 years ago that I would expect this 2024 team to be better than by the time you're entering game 12 of the year. USC, kind of a wild card. I think they'll definitely be better than they have been defensively, and that'll help. The question I have with them is, well, you got to replace Caleb Williams, which, like, you're not going to do that to the same level. Like, there's going to be at least a slight step back, presumably. I mean, I guess we've seen Lincoln Riley do this before and not miss a beat, but I'm less confident about that. They're the team of the newcomers from the Pac-12 that I wonder the most about in terms of transition to the Big Ten. And we all live through this with Nebraska. Like, it's hard, and it's hard in ways that are tough to explain in June. USC is the team I wonder the most about that. So that game is one where, based on FPI or some of these other ratings, Nebraska would be a heavy underdog. By the time we get to November, I expect that line to be a pretty tight one. And Nebraska will have a shot to go out there and potentially win.
I think the interesting storyline with Ohio State is you can expect a Lincoln Riley offense is probably going to be the top, if not one of the top, passing offenses in the Big Ten. But they're also, unless they have some transfers that really pop, probably going to have one of the weaker front sevens defensively, and you kind of wonder what that battle looks like, where it's, well, the other team's running for 250 yards on you, but you're throwing the ball for 300 yards on them, 350 yards on them. How does that work in the Big Ten? That's pretty intriguing to me. Brandon, I want to get your thoughts here, just to switch gears a little bit. You kind of briefly touched on it with some of those top teams in the Big Ten. What type of record do you think it's going to take to get to a Big Ten title game in the modern Big Ten now, with no divisions, with everyone having pretty universally a more difficult schedule this year? It's kind of the big wild card this year. Is what's it going to take to get to a college football playoff? What's it going to take to make it to a Big Ten title game? Do you have any early projections on what type of record a first or second place team in the Big Ten is going to have to go play in Indy?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see, So even though the Big Ten's expanding, they're still only playing 9 conference games for now. But they scheduled, those existing Big Ten teams scheduled their non-conference far in advance. So if there's any the conference got more difficult, your conference schedule is going to be more difficult annually with the addition of USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon. Your non-conference schedule right now doesn't reflect that. So I think 10 wins, which would be 10-2, which already right there is a change. I think, looking at, if we were talking about this in past years, you'd expect probably one of the teams to be undefeated or 11-1 going to the Big Ten title game. That didn't happen often for the team coming out of the West, but we don't have the division set up. So I'm guessing most years the Big Ten championship game will be a meeting of at least 2 double-digit win teams. probably closer to 10 wins than 12. Because I just think it's going to be harder to go undefeated, and it's going to take a while for those of us who watch college football for a long time to get used to the fact that, it's not that no teams will go undefeated anymore. It's just going to be rarer and rarer.
Vogues, what's coming up with Counter Read? How can folks get on board?
Yeah, you can hop on over to counterread.com. It's a twice-weekly newsletter from myself and Aaron Sorensen. In addition to writing about FPI, we kind of had a newsy middle of the week for Nebraska in recruiting, both football and basketball out of transfer. So there's going to be plenty of recruiting coming up in June. Continue to kind of look into these. There's some schedule stuff I still want to look at in the weeks ahead, and also some transfer stuff. Even though the transfer market is, a little bit quiet right now, there's some long-term stuff I want to dig into about players coming up from G5 or FCS versus those players who are maybe coming laterally from, say, another Power 5 program. So been putting together some numbers on that.
Folks, we'll holler on Saturday morning. Thanks for a few minutes today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Good to do some OT with Brandon Vogel from Counter Read. We'll check in with Gary Barnett in about 20 minutes or so. Greg Smith, national recruiting analyst from Rivals. Where's Nebraska on that national radar? Danny Burke, Burke's Best Bets. Elijah, we were talking about the best day ever. We heard from Keanu Reeves. A couple of motorcycle rides, some eating, and some wrestling.
What eating you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about probably some breakfast and some lunch and some dinner.
That's my concern with your list is you didn't feature any grill or smoking time in your Ultimate Sports Day.
I was getting there.
Not only was your Ultimate Sports Day 2 days long.
We ran out of time, and Mr. Snitley called me out. He wants more from me. So my Ultimate Sports Day is this, all right? I want yours as well.
We'll get there after the break.
Okay. And we've got some comments in the stream with what their Ultimate Sports Day would be. Mr. Jeff Snitley says, I expect more out of you than that, Schmidt. Maybe a tour of the Templeton Distillery that's in Iowa in the morning. Watch the Huskers hang 90 on the Hawkeyes in the evening. Perfect day would be sneaking in 9 or 18, going and doing a pregame show. I don't know how much I can do golf and pregame show, Husker game, and then get to a night game. But it would be NFL and it would be college. Scott had it right when he said he lived out in Hawaii. Games that start at 5 or 6 a.m., get done by 1, could go golf, and then go check out Hawaii for a night game. But the ultimate would be to get to a college game and then an NFL game and sneak in either some golf or smoking some ribs. Elijah's next with his day.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, winding down hour 1. Hail Varsity Radio, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, powered by Cornhead Lager. The Ultimate Sports Day is what for you? How do you spend it? As you have plenty of folks checking in. Jay Dowdy says, if Elijah goes, we'll start at the casino.
What does that mean?
The way that Jay put it was KC Chiefs this Black Friday at 2, helicopter to Iowa City for a Big Red takeover at 6:30, and then if Elijah's on the roadie, we start at the casino.
See, now that I think about it, the Ultimate Sports Day, in order to get rooting interest, probably does start with a $5 on a parlay, you know?
You hit a 5-team?
Like $5 on a parlay, that is definitely not going to hit, but it gives me something to root for throughout the day.
Keeps your interest.
So, like, I'm talking for a college football set, I got one bet in the parlays, an 11 a.m. game, one's a 2:30, one's a 7, one's a 9:30, because to me, the Ultimate Sports Day, and I would usually go with a college football Saturday, the problem being most college football Saturdays involve me working, and it's hard to be an Ultimate Sports Day whenever I'm working.
Well, here's the other side of that. We get to work,
Oh, absolutely.
In college football.
Absolutely.
Which is cool.
And I'm not discrediting that.
You're not whining. I know, but that's got to be on that day.
Because whenever I think about some of my favorite days of sports memory, it's involved me barely leaving my couch throughout the day.
Well, and look at Jimmy. Jimmy's like, look, dude, remote's in my hand from 11 a to 11 p.
And I want remote in my hand 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. enthralling action all day long. Some food that is bound to raise my cholesterol. Beers, smoked meats. We're talking chips and dip, like
guac.
Don't even get me started. Give me a bowl of guac and some tortilla chips, and I will go into a food coma. So I'm thinking kind of like a wild card Saturday type day. That's what I'm thinking. NFL wild card Saturday. If there's some college football on that day, awesome. But the kind of day where I can have some friends over to my house, I can throw something in the smoker. We can all look forward to
fall football party's great.
Some pulled pork sandwiches at the end of the day, something like that. And then if you want to cap it all off, give me some UFC events on at night. So it's like literally 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. There's good sports on all day. There's sports I care about all day. And it has some foods that I just want to snack upon all day. And it's the kind of day where you wake up Sunday and you're like, man, I didn't leave the house once yesterday. I barely left my living room and I have zero regrets. That's the ultimate sports day to me. I love going to sporting events, but it kind of keeps you away from being able to watch
see it all.
As many as you'd like to see. And that's kind of part of it to me is like, man, there wasn't a single second of sports action I missed yesterday.
I did live the ultimate day. I had that.
Did you?
It was September 26th, 2020. I was in the pool.
Uh-huh.
My dad was smoking ribs, and it was COVID. So we had a triple header of college football, capped off with the Pirate winning at LSU.
Oh, I remember that day.
And then talking to the Pirate later and having the last day to watch college football with my dad.
Nice.
So I had it. I did have it. G-Unit was with us. Garth was down. So we're floating in the pool, which was great. He had ribs on the smoker, which was great. And then Texas lost, Oklahoma almost lost, and the Pirate won. So 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
I would like to follow up here quickly and say if it is going to be a Husker football home Saturday, I just want to make sure I'm at a place where I can see all the games on TV and I have that food I can eat all day as well. Or maybe you're at the pool with the game on and you can see
This was unique because it was an 80-degree September day, and of course
you didn't have to work.
I didn't have to work because you had COVID. Right? You had no Big Ten football, but the SEC sure as hell was playing. Coach Barnett's on the way.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back into it at Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager, Hall of Fame coach Gary Barnett with this Colorado Northwestern. Coach, we are less than 90 days from kickoff. How you doing?
Doing well, just trying to figure out who's on our team daily. So I saw 40 of them at an event last Saturday. There were 40 players there, and I didn't know but one player that I know who he was because they were all new. 12 of them were grad transfers, and as their sponsor said when he was there, they're here to make some noise, and then they're out of here. So trying to keep up with who's coming in and who's going out and who we're going to have, and I really won't know till August, and I start going to practice and get an idea. So you say 90 days, that means I'm about 60 days from starting to go to practices.
Topic we talked about, Coach Barnett, is pretty cool. It's your ultimate day, and for a lot of us, that ultimate day includes sports. So I'm going to ask you, any golf course in the world, you're picking what as part of your ultimate sports day? What game or event would you attend?
Well, the golf course would be Pine Valley. The event, I'm not sure which that would be. I don't like those huge crowds. I think maybe the Ryder Cup would be something that there's so much energy at a Ryder Cup that I think that's probably the event that I would want to attend.
What about a college football game or rivalry? Is there a game of the year you'd check out?
Alabama-Auburn, probably.
Okay. All right.
I think that the Iron Bowls, I've done it about 3 times, and every one is a last play of the game. And I mean, the rivalry in the stadiums are just crazy, and outside the stadiums are just crazy. So I think that's probably the one college football game that if anybody could go see, they ought to go see.
All right, food. Are you going barbecue?
You know, I'm a pretty simple guy, Chris, so I'm going to have to say, you know, I'm either going to go sea bass or I'm going barbecue.
Okay.
And I probably would go right to the ribs. So
that's a good day. Barbecue ribs, Alabama, Auburn, and a little golf at Pine Valley. That's well done. It's been interesting as the talking season commences, Coach Barnett, and really like hearing from Joel Klatt and when he does his show. And he was talking about those season-shaping games with Nebraska, Colorado, added to some of that commentary with, you know, the Nebraska-Colorado game potentially being a launching point for Nebraska, and also maybe a return to Prime Mania, or, you know, Coach Dion. We remember a year ago with Colorado being the hottest team in college football. How do you deal with that as a head coach? How did you manage expectations, hype, the unknown, as you had some teams that really were on a lot of people's radar?
You know, you just control what you can control. You want to be the team that everybody wants to play. First of all, that's what you're trying to do. You want to be the team that people come and watch and want to play on that team. And so that means not only the way you play on the field, but the way you carry yourself off the field. So that was always our theme, is we wanted to be the team that people wanted to watch and wanted to play on. So those games were the games we wanted to play, and we look forward to them. But at the same time, you're trying to, all along from day one, you're trying to get your team to operate on a level, just a level theme, sort of, just keeping their emotions in check, not getting too low, not getting too high, understanding there's ups and downs, and you've got to maneuver through those ups and downs, and you've got to get down to a baseline. Always either get back up to a baseline or get down to a baseline, because we all operate as human beings. We operate better when our mind is still, and that's where we're trying to get. We get optimum use of our mind and energy when our head is still, when our thoughts are still, when our mind is still. So there's a great book out called Still Power about just that idea. But so that's what we're always trying to do, get them back to keeping their mind still.
Coach, are you a pretty avid reader? You mentioned Still Power. I'm going to check that out. But is that something that was just part of your routine? Obviously, you had practice, you had game planning, you had recruiting. I mean, I can't imagine how you shape your day or just the regimen of it, but the time for reading and things outside of football. How did you organize that?
Well, during the season, I didn't have time for reading, but it was in the off season when I would read, traveling, either recruiting or during the summer. I do most of my books are all self-help books. They're, two of my favorites are The Compound Effect, Still Power, and the other one is Chop Wood, Carry Water. Chop Wood, Carry Water and The Compound Effect I read a couple times a year. And so I am always looking for things, and I'm always looking for a theme. I remember I had a great theme one year, and it was about the Greeks, and it was but it was way over our players' heads. Came to me and says, "What are you doing? They have no idea what you're talking about." Well, I said, "Didn't they read the book?" And they said no, and of course I knew they didn't. But I had these sayings on shirts. I'm telling you, I was so far over their head. Not because they couldn't handle it. It's just they didn't want to handle or be a part of that. So, I've had a couple ones that I thought are great themes, and they just didn't work. So, you got to get back to a still mind is what you got to do.
Well, what brought on the Greek theme? Tell me more about what the team, the year, and what you wanted to do with it. How should it have gone?
It was Stephen Pressfield has written a number of really great books about the Greeks. And this particular one was written up about Macedonia, and it was I'm trying to think of the name of it right now, but I'm drawing a blank. I deleted it. There's just not enough room in this computer anymore. So, but it was about the way they lived their lives, and they had certain words that triggered a way to live your life, the way to go into battle, and the way to prepare, and the way to look at things. And they had all these Greek words. So I started putting those Greek words up and explaining what they were. And then I put them on a couple of T-shirts. Well, it just didn't work. And it was the year, I'm trying to think of the year even. I was at Colorado is when it was. So, it had to be probably 2003. But and then I had another one that I thought was just awesome, and it was about a chain, the strength of a chain, and how you had to earn the right to be a link in a chain. So I had 3 colored chains. I had a black chain, a gold chain, and a silver chain for our colors. One was special teams, one was offense, one was defense. And when you earned the right to be a link in that chain, then we had a ceremony during 2 days, and our strength coach had an anvil, and he brought out a link, and we put a spotlight on him, and he put that link on the chain. He says, "This is Bobby Jones," and Bobby Jones would come up, and he'd get to hold that chain up. And then that chain, those 3 links of those 3 chains hung in our meeting room. So
okay.
It was absolutely one of the most fun things I've ever done. Absolutely. And you know what? It just fizzled out. I don't know what happened. It just didn't work. Didn't attract the mentality or the record that we hope to get. So I think I've had 3 of those that were major failures. Well, not really failures, but they just didn't work. So.
Gary Barnett with us, Hail Varsity Radio. I love talking motivation. Interested here, Coach. I mean, recruiting is crazy. It's year-round. It's just a different world, and you have high school, and you have portal, and you have different ways to build the team. Nebraska has been doing camps. They're really focusing in on, all right, let's get the kids in during the spring game or the summertime for official visits, and then try and get them back on their own dime here during the season. But when it comes to putting a board together, recruiting, how did that go about it when you were putting your program together? You're building a board. You'd obviously assess what you need, Coach, but then what? I mean, take me through the whole recruiting and how you wanted to run your recruiting department.
Well, first of all, we always felt like if we could get a kid on campus 5 times, we'd have a legitimate chance at him. Now, our rankings didn't change. Mm-hmm. Our rankings on each player, now, some of it would have to do with location. You know, there's when you got even ability and even temperament and even family, you know, location has something to do with it. And so if it was a Colorado kid that matched up perfectly with a Texas kid and a California kid, we'd go Colorado first. But that didn't happen very often. But it did. You had to always allow for that. You know, we wanted character. We wanted grades. We wanted ability. We wanted leadership. I took as many high school captains as I could. And, you don't have to teach leadership as hard as you do to other guys when they've already been in that position once. So those were all things. But you got to remember, Chris, we were getting these players for 5 years, 4 to 5 years, and we knew it. And who is it we wanted to spend 4 or 5 years with, or who is it over 4 or 5 years we could develop and enjoy doing it and not have it be a pain in the butt? These days, I don't even know if those things come into play, because the likelihood of you having somebody, first of all, if you get one that ends up not being very good, you can put them in the portal and get rid of them. You couldn't do that before. You're stuck with the guy. So your team that you're picking, when I was coaching, were your guys for 5 years. So you better like them, and they better be guys that you hope can play and you can depend on. Now, truth be known, if 50% of your recruiting class ends up being a starter, that's a darn good percentage. So, and you know that when you go into it. But we knew we were going to have those guys unless they failed out of school, which very rarely ever happened, or they transferred, which at that time didn't happen at all. So it's different now, because you can make a mistake and you don't have to live with it. At the same time, you can make a mistake, a bunch of mistakes, and maybe you don't have to live with them, but they don't keep you around very long when you keep making the mistakes. So it's a totally different approach and a different life in the coaching world now than it was.
Gary Barnett's with us, Coach, joining us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, we'll wind it down with this. 2 programs, 2 transitions. What program is okay, do you think? What program, I don't want to say is in trouble, but it's going to be difficult? Who's in a better spot for sustained success, Bama or Michigan?
You said Bama or Michigan?
Yeah, because it's post-Saban, post-Harbaugh era. Oh,
well, I think probably Michigan, because I would have said the competition level is a lot easier for Michigan than it is for Bama. But I think with Oregon and Washington going into that league, and SC going into that league, that all of a sudden Michigan now is going to have to play, or could have to play, a full schedule of really good teams. So I would say, Michigan initially, but when you add those other teams in, then I think it's a push. I'd say they're both about the same. They're both new coaches. I think the coach that had already been there at Michigan for a while, he has an advantage in this situation. There's not much transition, and he's been the interim, so kids know what to expect. Where the difficulty or the challenge is for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, because first of all, he's from nowhere close to those parts, and he's that transition they're going to be very skeptical of him, and they have been, but he's going to have to earn that. So it's a different deal for the coaches there. But I think competition level is going to be pretty close now. But I think the easier way would be for Michigan because of the transition issue.
Gary Barnett with us. Both schedules this year are murder. I mean, they're just incredible games when you look at the week in, week out. Coach, enjoy your weekend. Have some fun with golf, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for chatting with us.
Great being with you, Chris. Thank you.
Good to spend time with Coach Barnett. Good thoughts there on just his ultimate sports day. Golf, a little barbecue, of course, some football. It's been a fun topic. We'll get to some of your comments in the stream, how you want to roll. Appreciate all the input. The Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Subscribe and like there. Find us also. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Greg Smith next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Let's talk some recruiting on a national scale, and national recruiting analyst with Rivals and Yahoo. It is our friend Greg Smith at Greg Smith Rivals, where you follow him on Twitter. Greg, you are in all sorts of recruiting mode, my friend. So many camps around the country you've been checking out. and so many different prospects you've had interactions with, man. I know it's busy. How you been?
I have been busy, but I'm happy to be back here with you guys. Yeah, it feels like I have not. I think in the last maybe 8 weeks, I've probably been home 2 weekends, it feels like. So that's okay. We're seeing a lot of folks, and there's a lot of info out there.
Ton of info on the local front. Jamarian Parker giving the thumbs up to Nebraska yesterday. We talked quite a bit about it. Want to get your take on the national scene. Just what type of hotbed St. Louis is. Are they still? Is that region still pretty high level compared to what that run was 5, 6, 7 years ago? Talk to me a little bit about the St. Louis area.
Yeah, I think it's definitely comparable to what we've seen over the last 5, 6 years. Like, I don't think there's been any real drop off in kind of the overall talent coming out of the state. The thing that actually honestly makes it more difficult is that you've only seen more schools come into that area. Like, it is almost to the point to where it's over recruited because every school makes a run through there. And we've talked about this before about how like Kansas City has continued to rise up in a different part of the state. Like, we're just seeing that all over the place. But now St. Louis has definitely continued to be a hotbed. And there's, again, a number of high-level prospects in the area in both this cycle for 25 and also coming up in 26 as well.
Do you consider St. Louis 500-mile radius for Nebraska? It's right on that edge, and we talk so much about the 500-mile radius and in-state. We can sense, I guess, with this commitment, Nebraska might be trying to make that a part of the 500-mile radius. What do you consider St. Louis? Is that kind of a gray area?
I would say it's a little bit gray. I would not necessarily consider it part of the 500-mile radius, and that actually probably makes things a little bit better for Nebraska because it means, the tough going that they've had out there, it makes it a little bit easier to swallow, right? And so, no, I would not consider it part of the 500-mile radius, but at the same time, it's an area that's close enough to where you feel weird if you're a Nebraska fan watching Nebraska have those struggles there, or in some cases, and because this has gone previous, like many coaching staffs now, in some cases where you just flat out ignore it. I don't know if you can do that, but when you do that and that builds up over years, it makes it so much more difficult to get your foot in the door with the talent out there. So you have to put the effort in.
Who's kind of planted their flag? I assume Missouri and Illinois are two programs. Ohio State also had some success. Yeah. Who's moved into the neighborhood?
Yeah, Tennessee has moved into the neighborhood. They're a program that, as you look around for teams in their they're just far enough away to where it feels like for those kids they're getting away from home, but then it's also
not that bad
familiar.
Though.
Yeah, but it's not that bad, right? And so those are some of the things where you have to end up watching out for. One of the key things, and it's obviously it's not far away, but Missouri doing a much better job in state of keeping those guys home, doing a much better job of just being an attractive program because they're on the rise under Eli Drinkwitz and people like that staff. And I always mention this, you cannot forget to mention their NIL program as well, which is kind of at the forefront of everything that they're doing. And it's no surprise that they've made a run with recruiting as that continues to rise as well.
Personally, Greg, on Missouri, I feel like their NIL program has been one of the more surprising NIL stories that we've had. Like, whenever NIL was announced, I wasn't expecting, maybe Missouri can become a power with all their money.
Right.
But still, somehow they have all these NIL resources. Can you speak on that for a second? Because I'm not going to say they're outdueling Nebraska on some guys, but they have in the past, and it's a credit to the NIL they've built up there.
What they've done, which is different than some other schools, they're like, say, like compared to, we were just talking about Tennessee, like compared to Tennessee, what the difference with Missouri is they're just more organized behind the scenes. Like the thing that I always hear about Missouri and their NIL program, like, yes, they are putting the money up, even though you would not think that they'd have the same level of money as, say, a Nebraska or a Tennessee or some of these other schools. But they're very organized. They seem to do a good job of knowing who they want to target. And there is also another wrinkle that kind of goes into this as well for the in-state kids in particular, is it allows their state laws allow for them to get NIL money once they sign with the school. Mm-hmm. So they don't have to wait as long to be able to then get that money too. We saw that kind of come into play last cycle with five-star defensive lineman Williams and Wari when he picked Missouri over basically the who's who of college football.
Greg Smith with us here, a few minutes recruiting hit. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Greg, of course, national recruiting analyst with Rivals at Greg Smith Rivals on Twitter. It's where you follow him. Where does Omaha fall as you've covered this region and now expanded nationally? Omaha keeps growing and growing, and it's not just the Iowas or the K-States anymore coming into Omaha. It's national programs. Warren Academy, of course, has been big time with that. I'm interested to where's Omaha fall on this landscape compared to a St. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, it's below a St. Louis, but it is somewhere in the range of Kansas City at this point, given the amount of kids that continue to come out. But the thing is that it's different than some other cities where it seems like the attention comes a little bit later for those prospects. You're still, the one thing that you're not seeing yet across the board from Omaha prospects is seeing a lot of those early offers, right? Like you see them here and there, like you see Braylon Warren pick up an offer from Iowa State here a couple of days ago, and they're a school that is known for being very early on that they see a kid they like, they go ahead and offer no matter where that kid is in their development if they like him. But you're not seeing that across the board, and I think that's the next step. But Omaha is right there with some other really good places as far as talent, and I think that coaches know that you get players out of Omaha that are not maxed out as far as their potential, because they're not able to focus full-time on football because they're multi-sport athletes, which is another thing that college coaches really like.
What is the impact of Xavier Watts been in all of that? I feel like he's been, I don't want to say a surprise because he was highly recruited coming out of high school, but to have him go of the year he had last year, has that put Omaha on the map even more than it previously was among some national powers?
Yeah, I definitely do think that that's part of it. And I think I've said this before, is that I think this goes back, even though before that, if you go back to, remember Cam Jurgens' year when, he's out at Beatrice and LSU was trying to make a push for him. And you're like, what is going on here? The LSU coming up to Beatrice, Nebraska to try and flip a Nebraska kid, even though obviously there was some coaching turmoil at that point, which is what kind of led to that with the firing. But you've seen that continue to grow year after year, going into kind of that Henrich year, coming out of Burke with him and Chris Hickman and those guys in that class. And what happened was then when you get to Xavier Watts' year, it's those Notre Dames and those schools have already seen him a couple of times because they were watching the other kids. So I do think that it's a trickle-down effect, but it's been building for many years now, which is great for the kids.
Greg, want to get your take here, what Bama is right now under DeBoer. I ask that because of the race for Dawson Merritt, Bama and Nebraska. That's a guy that's super high, along with Christian Jones, two linebackers that Nebraska likes, two linebackers that everybody likes.
Right, absolutely. What's interesting about Kalen DeBoer in Alabama is we talked about this kind of as a national staff. Remember when he was first hired and, they had this kind of exodus of top recruits and a couple of them did come back. And then you kind of had to wait and see. I think that people were waiting to see, but then totally forgot that he's lost 4 games in the last 5 years or something like that. He's a great coach. They were always going to start to get that rolling. And now you look around and you see them getting a little bit different profile of recruit because he's just not able to pick who he wants like Nick Saban. But Dawson Merritt is a really good player that obviously is picking between Nebraska and Alabama, but he has a good fit at both. I know he really likes kind of the way that Alabama has pitched him on how they want to use him in their defense and had a relationship with that staff before they got to Alabama. He loves the relationships across the board here at Nebraska as well. That one's going to be tough. I think at this point, Nebraska leads going into that Alabama official visit. If you're Nebraska, you'd prefer those visits to be flipped, though, because you just don't like the idea of him going down there last and then making the decision. But right now, going into that visit, which starts tomorrow, I do like Nebraska in this race, in a close one right now.
Greg, as we look at the national powers Nebraska's recruiting against, you have guys, you talk about Dawson Merritt, you have Omaha kid Christian Jones. I think you could even consider Jamarian Parker in that same category of there's some national powers going after him. One more name, Jalen Williams. His recruitment might be starting to wind down. Husker coaches really want to get him onto campus by the end of June, but there's some national smoke out there. Maybe his recruitment isn't going to last that long. Do you have any more information on Jalen Williams?
Yeah, kind of defensive lineman out of Palatine, Illinois, 4-star kid for us. Michigan pushing hard on that one. He did. It's not a good sign for other schools that he was supposed to go to Miami this weekend, ended up changing that visit to Michigan this coming weekend, and that's where kind of that buzz has started to build with him potentially ending up in that that Michigan class. I do think there's a strong chance that ends up happening. If Nebraska can get him to hold off on that and get him on campus, they've got a puncher's chance. But I think I kind of like Michigan to finish that one off. But you are seeing Nebraska have to go head-to-head with some real national teams. That Christian Jones one is a fascinating recruitment as we've seen that continue to develop. But on that one, honestly, that could continue to go longer than you might expect. The last time I talked to him about this, like, he is not sure that he's just going to make a decision this summer. Like, I could see that going into the season.
Greg, one more name for you here. Buford, Georgia linebacker Jaden Perlot, not quite sure how to pronounce that one. Perlotti. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He posted a picture yesterday on his Twitter with Dylan Raiola. Nebraska never really seems to have been in the mix on this one, but then this kind of comes out of the blue. Maybe Dylan Raiola's peer recruiting him. That tweet is now pinned on his profile. Are you reading into that at all?
A little bit, because it does give you, at least it gives you the foot in the door. Like sometimes too, especially these kids that are in like a totally different geographic footprint, even though, you know, obviously he's familiar with Dylan because they were at Buford together. If you get those kids on campus, you show them what Nebraska is about. You've obviously got their interest because Dylan flipped to him. You give yourselves a shot there. That kid's being recruited by everyone. He is a sensational linebacker prospect. But you get a chance if you actually get him on campus. They've had him on campus. We'll see where it goes from there.
Greg, I wanted to ask you about Bishop Gorman, big-time program in Vegas. Nebraska's targeting a trio of offensive linemen. I know there's connections with Coach Donnie. But Gorman is, it's a national high school program that's nationally recruited. Who's got the best foot in the door in Gorman? Is it still Oregon? Is it still Southern California, BYU? Talk to me a little bit about the most frequent visitors there to Gorman and what the way the wind's blowing for Gorman prospects.
Yeah, it's changed a little bit in recent years, right? Like that used to be a USC stranglehold. And kind of as we've seen a lot on the West Coast with some of those programs, even in California, Oregon has really made a move in there. And we're seeing Oregon a lot more here in the Midwest too. As they make that move to the Big Ten, I think you'll see Nebraska cross paths with them quite a bit as we continue to move forward. But yeah, I think that Oregon now is probably the top power that goes in there now. But you're right. It's schools from all over that like to go to Bishop Gorman. Notre Dame likes to go out there as well. They've got a receiver out there that's probably going to pick Notre Dame here soon. It's a really good program that pumps out Power 5 players every single year, and so you're going to definitely get the who's who of college football going in there all the time.
Greg Smith with us as we wrap up, national recruiting analyst with Rivals at Greg Smith Rivals. Where you follow him on Twitter. A final thought, and just what is the reputation with some of these national prospects, Greg, that you talk to every day with Matt Rule, with the Nebraska program? What's the rep right now going into year 2?
It is Nebraska is a program on the rise, and that I'm kind of curious on what they have going on. I think that's where people are right now, which is actually a good place to be in, I think, because if you go into the season and start well, you end up making a bowl game, especially when you have what everybody believes is going to be kind of a multi-year starter and a freshman quarterback that was highly recruited, an anticipated player. That can really start to help you to build momentum. But I think if people are really intrigued and excited by what's going on with Matt Rule and this staff, and they really like the staff. Like that is something across the board that, people find this staff to be very genuine, hardworking. The things that we've kind of noticed about them from covering them, that translates in the living room as well.
Greg, best to you, man. We'll get you run down here in the near future, and thanks for a few minutes.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Good seeing you.
Good stuff as we wrap up recruiting. KG asks who's Nebraska's ace recruiter. Scott says it's Matt Rule. The other Brian says Raiola. I think it might be the pride of Chicago. Danny Burke with his picks, with his Thursday segments.
I sure hope Nebraska's prospective recruits aren't listening and following Danny's picks. We're going to have some serious problems.
Yeah. Maybe I need to dial that back. Burksbeat.com is where you go to find Danny's work, his suggestions, and his write-ups at Danny Burke 5 on Twitter, Burke's Beat, also the pod. Danny, you're locked in the Windy City, brother. How we doing?
We're doing good. Yeah, I've been staying out of the recruiting scene for Nebraska football, so No need to worry to everybody out there. So I've been keeping my distance. And, depending on how they do, that may tarnish some relationships down the road. So that's why, I don't really get involved in that scene. Not yet, at least. Anyway.
What are some of your folks in the association that you've reached out to? What's their quick take on Hurley in L.A.?
I refuse to believe that it's actually a thing, because it seems like it's really split in half with people who are actually buying into this, and then the other side is kind of the same line of thinking as me. I mean, you think about someone like Dan Hurley, who's so controlling, so powerful, and then you would potentially go to a team in Los Angeles that possesses the most powerful and over-controlling player in LeBron James. I don't really see how that fits. LeBron James is a coach killer. I mean, that's just a fact. That's what's happened in the past. Now, of course, he may not be a part of the team, but if you're Dan Hurley, you're probably going there because you're going to have a solid team, or maybe he just wants the opportunity to be in the NBA. I don't know. I get the idea of not wanting to be in that recruiting trail and dealing with NIL in the bigger stage of the NBA, but again, you lose power once you go to the association. We saw it happen with Fred Hoiberg, much different coach than Hurley for sure, but I just don't know if you're going to get that same type of success to translate like you would as he has at UConn right now. So I'm not really buying into it until it's set in stone. So it's an interesting story, but we also heard about J.J. Redick, so who the heck really knows?
And I tell you what, Danny, it'd be shocking to me for Lakers GM Rob Pelinka to make a questionable front office move such as this. He's never done that before in his career. He definitely didn't ship off D'Lo for pennies and then bring him back years later at a much higher cost. He's never done anything crazy as a GM of the Lakers, so I say that tongue-in-cheek. He makes a lot of crazy decisions.
Danny, let's talk NBA Finals. Finally, basketball back. Celtics minus 6.5 tonight. As you've studied this series, how you feeling here? The book says, Boston in 6? Possibly. You can get all sorts of props. You can do a lot of different things. So what are you looking at tonight? Let's just start with game 1.
Yeah, for game 1, and this kind of goes entirely with my series handicap, but the write-up I did for an outlet called the Sporting Tribune, I really focused in on the deviations that we've seen from a statistical standpoint from the regular season to the postseason for both of these teams. And the biggest improvement that we've witnessed out of Dallas is their defensive improvements. I mean, their defensive effective field goal percentage has gone from 55% to just a little bit over 51% with the additions of P.J. Washington, Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively's emergence. They've been a threat down low. Conversely, Boston defensively has kind of been a liability around the rim. They've allowed opponents to make over 70% of their shots near the rim throughout the postseason. During the regular season, that number was under 64%. And when you look at their last 3 series, meaning Boston's last 3 opponents, the players on the opposing teams that were taking the most shots out of all that personnel at the rim averaged double digits. Hawkins Jr. on the Heat, 13 points per game. Evan Mobley over 21 points per game. And they had Obi Toppin at 10.5 points per game. So then you kind of note a couple of guys on Dallas who are taking a majority of their shots from there, the aforementioned Lively and Daniel Gafford. Now, Gafford gets a little bit more playing time and a little bit more scoring. So I targeted him over 8.5 points for this first game. I think the price I got it at was like plus 102. You may be able to still get it right around there, if not even better, for a game 1 prop. But I think those type of guys are someone who you should monitor on a game-to-game basis. Even if he doesn't go over in game 1, it's advantageous to go against the Celtics down low because they've been struggling there. Even with Porzingis back, still may be a little bit of an adjustment for him off of that pretty serious injury with his Achilles. So, I like Gafford at least in game 1 over his points.
Danny Burke with us here, Burke's Best Bets, talking some NBA Finals. And Danny, how much do you bet the superstars in this series, if you will? Because that's who have gotten these teams to this point. Everyone knows Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Luka, Kyrie. Those are the guys that carried him. Those are probably going to be guys that, whichever team wins this, are probably going to get carried to the championship by those guys. Do you touch those guys' props here in an NBA Finals, or do you look more under the radar guys?
Yeah, I'm trying to target more under the radar guys, Elijah, because at this stage, it's only 1 game left, right? It's the biggest stage in the NBA right now. So all of these books have adjusted accordingly. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be value on a random game night, or if one player kind of slacks for game one, then you can pick them back up in game two, or even live betting with these player props. That certainly presents a viable option. And then, of course, just going to the under. But in terms of betting the overs with these superstar players, I'm definitely going to be timid for this first spot because, one, it's going to be adjusted a little bit higher than it should be. And two, and more importantly, I really want to see how they match up. Certainly I have an idea of what's going to happen, but how are they going to switch off of these pick and rolls? Who's going to have the advantage after they switch? Who's going to be able to create separation at what point in the game? And then just the substitutions and rotations, especially for a team like Boston and guys coming off the bench. How does that affect when like Jaylen Brown's out there and Jason Tatum isn't? Because that's when Brown typically thrives, but his points prop may be a little bit too high today. So, again, that's going to be more of a wait-and-see approach with the top players.
Danny, hang tight. We'll do a little overtime with you if you've got a couple on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, Danny Burke with us, Burke's Best Bets, burksbeat.com. And find him on Twitter at DannyBurke5. We'll wind down a Thursday next on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Couple more minutes. Danny Burke with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Burksbeat.com is where you find Danny at Danny Burke 5. Just to wrap, in what player on Boston could give Luka issues? He's been just on fire. I know you've kind of looked at all the angles. That's one I'm curious about because as good as Boston is, Luka could go to another level.
Yeah, and I was talking about this on the latest episode of my podcast with the guest that I had on, and he brought up a really good point, and he would love to see a guy like Jason Tatum go up against Luka Doncic, basically from the size perspective in the frame. And then I kind of countered and go, well, we may not see that because if you're going to be guarding Luka Doncic, inevitably you're going to end up in foul trouble. He's doing a master class of drawing fouls, especially late in the game. So it could be a scenario where they have somebody else on him for a majority of the game, and then when it comes down the wire, then you switch to someone like Tatum, because simultaneously, when you're guarding Luka, you're going to be exhausting a lot of energy, and they don't want to take that away from him on the offensive front. So again, that's why game one, it's a lot of wait and see kind of approaches. But I think Tatum, because of that length, does make a lot of sense in terms of the best opportunity to limit him. Again, you're not going to stop him. You can only hope to contain him type of thing. But, yeah, maybe it would have to be Tatum, guys.
Danny, one more thing here before we get out, and I just sent this to Schmitty during the break. FanDuel Sportsbook has posted some of their stats for the NBA Finals, and apparently, according to them, which should they be trusted? Who knows? They say the public's all over Dallas. 82% of the total moneyline bets, 65% of the handle, 64% of the spread bets, with 57% of the handle. Whenever a sports book tweets out something like that, what is your reaction?
You're probably screwed if you're on that side. It's usually my reaction. So, it definitely makes the side of Boston tempting. Look, it doesn't mean you always just blindly go on the opposite side, but I do think Boston gets the job done in game one. It still doesn't mean that like I'm that comfortable laying 6.5. Again, you know I always say it. I'm probably going to wait for a better number. I expect Boston to win game one. My bet for the series, fellas, is to go over 5.5 games. So I'm thinking Dallas can come back in game two, but hopefully we get along.
Danny Burke, burksbeat.com, at Danny Burke 5, and of course, Burke's Best Bets with us here on Hail Varsity. Daddy, be good. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll check in soon, bud.
Yeah, you as well, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
There he is, Danny Burke. Great stuff, and his podcast is money as well. Check that out, Burke's Beat, burksbeat.com, and use your seatbelt. Get buckled in. Seatbelts save lives. They prevent injuries only if properly worn. Make it click. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Are you ready for a steak and a beer? Elijah Herbel.
I already think I know what it's going to happen tonight.
Okay.
I'm going Celtics win, but Mavs cover.
Okay.
Is that too specific for you?
No. I can take Boston, lay the points.
Okay, so we both have Boston winning game one, which I think they're at home. That Boston crowd's going to be raucous. That's a tough place to go win. Like game one of the finals. The Boston.
So we really
sports
can't bet. I mean, I can take Dallas as well in the points. But you like the Mavs covering that 6.5.
I like the Mavs.
That's a big number.
I like the Mavs covering 6.5, but I think the Celtics win.
Isn't it 210, 212 for the over?
214.
214. All right, let's do the over.
You went over or under?
Give me the over.
I'll take the under.
All right, There we go. Steak and a beer. There it is. We're back tomorrow at 4 with Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Thanks.